Frederick had written something with a pencil that no one should have seen. Behind all that charm, those words show why he was really hurting. What the dancing king was hiding would shock everyone. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska, on May 10, 1899. It was Frederick Austerlitz that he really was. Fritz's dad came to the U.S. from Austria in 1893 to try to make a better life for himself. There wasn't much money for him to live on because he sold beer. And Fred's mom was born into a German immigrant family and taught piano to make money for the family. She saw something special when Fred was only 3 years old. He was dancing just like his bigger sister Adele. That idea would shape their whole lives. She thought show business could help them get out of poverty. Fred began dancing casually by watching Adele in 1903 when he was only 4 years old. Frederick started taking dance classes at the same time she did at the Chambers Dance Academy in Omaha. Following 2 years, in 1905, Fritz lost his job and the family had to move to New York City. They were deeply in debt. More than $200 was owed to them. Even so, and didn't give up. Both of her kids went to dance school, and by 1906, Fred and Adele were doing small comedy shows that made them $50 each. He was only 7 years old, but Fred danced for a long time, sometimes 12 hours a day. There were no rules back then to protect children, and took care of everything and kept going, even though they didn't have much. As an addition to his acting skills, Fred also learned to play the piano, the accordion, and the trumpet. When they were 7 years old, the kids had a name, the Astaires. As many as 20 shows a week were added to their tour of the Midwest. The family got a lot of help from the $150 they made per job. Fred practiced for 8 hours every day and worked really hard. He learned to dance because of artists like Bill Bojangles Robinson. But in some places, kids younger than 14 weren't allowed on stage, so they used fake names. Fred played the part of Freddie Austin. When they came back to Omaha in 1908 to play at the Orpheum Theater, the crowd loved them. They were paid $150 a week and given lots of flowers. However, things did not get easier. Fred started to get shorter than Adele, and by 1912, the difference was too big to hide on stage. Their break lasted 2 years. There was a scary event in 1909 when Fred was only 10 years old. He lost his cool during a show in Keyport, New Jersey. Frightened of the stage took over. The show had to be canceled, which cost the organizers $200. In order to keep his good name, his mother told everyone he was sick. Fred was very tired. Within that year, he had performed at over 300 events. He said that moment had been following him around for many years. He was always worried, so Adele made fun of him by calling him the Moaning Minnie. Frederick, on the other hand, turned his fear into drive. He practiced over and over again until he was great. After 12 years, Fred was 13 years old. Adele had 16 years. When they came back to performance, they had more energy, taking ideas from Vernon and Irene Castle to make routines look better. They sought better opportunities in England in 1923 and became stars of a show called Stop Flirting. It played at the Shaftesbury Theater for 18 times and earned them $4,000 a week. Frederick learned new things during that time, even though London was still filled with memories of the war. Cancer killed Fred's father in 1924. He kept going even though it was hard throughout that year. A 10 times visitor, the Prince of Wales learned how to tap dance from Adele. Their big breakthrough in the U.S. happened in 1917. Frederick was 18 years old, and Adele was 21. They got a large article in the Patriotic Review, which came out on November 28, 1917. Their weekly pay was $250, which is more than $6,000. Frederick pushed their practice sessions late into the night. The hard work they put into their act made critics say it was one of the best parts of the show. Additionally, Fred's first time advertising himself with a full-page ad in Variety magazine. It turned out to be worth it. They played lead parts in The Bunch and Judy in 1922. Many people didn't like the show, but the Astaires stood out. Adele had started dating Lord Charles Cavendish, a British nobleman she met in London, in secret. According to rumors, gossip magazines started following her around, taking pictures of her, and making hints that she might be dating a prince. Adele's secret dates meant Fred had to work harder to keep the act going. There were 63 performances of the show, and things were getting worse. Later, in 1924, Lady, Be Good came out. When it came out on December 1st, it was a huge hit. The music was written by the Gershwin brothers, and Fred danced so hard that he needed a bucket of water just off stage to calm down. The show opened in New York and ran for 330 performances before going to London for another 326. It made $55,000 in its first week. Only 500 copies of a unique record with an interesting beat were made. A few years later, one of those books was added to the house library. The theater Funny Face opened in 1927. It was crazy and slick. Fred wore a top hat and tails for the first time, which was a new way to mix jazz and tap. Rehearsals for the show were rough, and after bad reviews in Philadelphia, the name was changed from Smarty. After it started on November 22nd, though, it ran for 244 shows, followed by 263 more in London. The news was more interested in Adele's friendship with Cavendish than in the dancing. Everybody thought there would be a wedding. The Bandwagon was their last show together in 1931. It started on June 3rd. The reviewers really liked it, especially a dark and slow dance number to Dancing in the Dark. Adele had already made up her mind, though, behind the scenes. She was going to get married to Cavendish and always not be on stage. Fred attempted to persuade her otherwise, but she was set in her ways. Their last curtain fell on March 5, 1932. It was over for them after 27 years of dancing together. Fred was 32 years old and alone on stage at this point. Fred took a huge risk right after that. The actor took a plane to Hollywood for a test. A report was made on him by RKO on July 26, 1933. Balding, can't act, a little attractive, and dances a bit, it said. It made me look bad. His weekly pay was limited to $750, which was less than Ginger Rogers's. Nearly someone else took his place after the first week. Everything changed when people saw him dance and flying down to Rio. It was changed on the ads to say, "Introducing Fred Astaire." In spite of the win, there was pain. On September 12, 1933, 105 takes were needed to make a dance scene in the same movie. It only lasted 40 seconds. It cost hundreds of dollars for each take. It cost $27,000 more than planned. He was called difficult by studio managers, and other companies paid him less because of it. But Fred made his name at that time. To stay in charge and always look for the best tape. In 1934, Fred got into a big fight over costumes while shooting The Gay Divorce. He did not like the way Ginger Rogers' dress moved. He stated that it seemed like a bedsheet flying by. Before one dress met his standards, 17 were turned down. His rules even included not allowing diamonds that were too big. Even so, the movie made $1.8 million, even though it only cost $800,000. This kept the company from losing a lot of money. Rogers finally got equal exposure, but after that, every outfit had to go through Fred. That was followed by Top Hat in 1935. In Fred's dream, he was dancing on a roof that was spinning. Stainless steel was used to make the turntable. But when it was being tested, it got stuck, and Ginger Rogers broke her foot. For 18 days, work stopped. It was said that someone had hacked the set. People didn't like Fred's requests. Even though it didn't prove anything, it made things even more tense than they were before. Rogers returned, dancing while wearing an ankle brace. The crew called her Chicken Little in jest, because the feathers in her shoes kept falling out. It was 1936, and Fred and the director were arguing over a song. He did not want to dub it. He wanted to sing it live. He indicated that he would quit if they called it. The studio gave in. Although Fred hid a microphone in his coat, you could still hear his heavy breathing and some pitch problems. Some reviewers didn't like it, but the people who saw it loved it. Within 6 months, 110,000 copies of the music were sold. It won the Oscar for Best Song, too. In Hollywood from 1933 to 1937, something magical took place. After starting out as a dancer on Broadway, Fred Astaire quickly became one of the biggest movie stars. His career began in 1933 with a third-tier role in the movie Flying Down to Rio. People thought differently about him after seeing him dance with Ginger Rogers. In just 6 years, they worked together on 9 musicals, and 6 of them made more money than any other RKO movie. It was his 7th movie, and it made him $177,000 when it came out in 1937. Actually, Katharine Hepburn made less that year. At work, Astaire was very careful to be perfect. Because he practiced so much, Ginger Rogers once left the school with cut feet after doing the same dance 54 times. He finally stopped worrying about being tied to someone else's act after the company gave him 10% of the profits as a reward. Things weren't happy for long in 1937, though. For the May album Shall We Dance, George and Ira Gershwin wrote 9 new songs. 9 weeks later, George Gershwin died from a brain tumor. There was only 38 of him. The last thing he gave the world were the songs in that movie. While Astaire had been working on They Can't Take That Away From Me for weeks, he was unable to finish practices when he learned of Gershwin's surgery. In a letter to his lawyer, he said he couldn't go on. There was a delay at the office. When the song was over, the director didn't want to do any more takes to spare Astaire more pain. Astaire walks back and forth between takes with his head in his hands, looking very sad. This is a rare color film clip. The next year, in 1939, he played the lead role in the story of Vernon and Irene Castle. Real-life Irene Castle didn't like how Ginger Rogers looked, so RKO didn't want it to be a serious homage. Ginger's normal curly hair was not allowed, so she made her wear bobbed wigs instead. The company lost an extra $8,000 because of the delay. A magazine called Gossip started stories about Fred Astaire and Edna May Oliver at the same time, an actress who is 53 years old and played their boss. True, the reports were so strong that RKO had to tell reporters that Oliver barely left the house because of her arthritis. Sad to say, this was Oliver's last movie before she died in 1942. The movie did well at the box office, but it wasn't as big of a hit as their other movies. In 1940, Astaire tried something new at MGM with Broadway Melody of 1940, where he danced with Eleanor Powell. More than $120,000 was spent just to build a big mirror set for their big dance number, Begin the Begin. The company spent $1.6 million on the movie. It took more than 4 minutes to film in one take, but early versions were even longer. Astaire asked to cut Powell's song short because people were clapping before he even came on. That made him feel bad. He was smoking 2 packs of Camels a day during practice, which is a lot more than he usually does. In contrast, Powell broke 3 sets of tap shoes. Though critics loved the dancing, MGM secretly gave some of Astaire's other planned roles to George Murphy so that Astaire wouldn't get all the attention. Astaire then worked with Columbia Pictures to make You Were Never Lovelier with Rita Hayworth in 1942. He encouraged the studio to feature Latin music, and the Xavier Kagut's band agreed to play. Since that was decided, the music fund went over $30,000. It took Hayworth 6 hours of training every day to keep up with the star's footsteps. The company made sure they stood out on the movie posters, though. And when it came out in Argentina, a kiss scene was cut out and the movie was cut down by 2 minutes. Even so, it was a big hit, making $2.2 million in the US alone. After Ginger, Hayworth became his most famous partner. By 1945, Astaire was ready for a change. His movie Yolanda and the Thief, which felt like a dream, was a big risk. It had rainbow clouds and stairs that flowed in the air. It cost over $2.3 million to make, which was twice as much as he normally spent. Unfortunately, it did not work. The movie lost $1 million and only made $1.5 million. It was called Astaire's Waterloo in Variety magazine. He said in March 1946 that he was giving up movie dancing because he felt embarrassed and tired. Instead, he wanted to open a chain of dance schools. Fans thought he was going to fail since he borrowed $200,000 to make that movie. It turned out to be correct when MGM's business records came out in 1974. Hollywood was shocked by his quick exit. In a letter, Gene Kelly even asked if it was finally safe to dance again. That retirement didn't last long, though. Gene Kelly hurt himself playing volleyball in 1948 and had to miss the Easter parade. Astaire came back to save the movie just weeks before it was to be filmed. She said he put her fully at ease, which made Judy Garland very happy. Because of her health, she could not work on their next project, so they only made that one movie together. Whatever, the shooting was quick. The short time frame was mostly due to Astaire's preference for filming moves exclusively in one take. The camera moved at different speeds on the stairs in the scene called Steppin' Out with My Baby. Back in the 1940s, this was a very hard thing to do. But it worked out great and helped Astaire's career get back on track. The Barclays of Broadway was still something MGM wanted to make in 1949, but Judy Garland missed too many days. After letting her go, the studio called Ginger Rogers, who was living in Oregon in peace. There were reports that she and Astaire had broken up, but she said she'd love to work with him again. Quickly, they changed the story, added a Gershwin song, and changed the dances to fit Rogers's style. Within 6 weeks, they were shooting. It was their only color movie together, and it was a beautiful homage to the 1930s black and white standards they made. What Astaire did next in 1951 looked like magic. In Royal Wedding, he danced all the way up to the roof and across the walls. However, there was no trick with special effects. The set was situated on a huge metal wheel that slowly turned while the camera stayed still. Even though Astaire trained in a harness, he didn't wear it for the final shot. He had to time his steps just right so he wouldn't trip over the wires. It cost $75,000 to make the scene, which the company didn't like, but the risk paid off. It was praised by reviewers as one of the most impressive scenes in the history of movies. Featuring Audrey Hepburn, he was in the 1957 movie Fantastic Face. Although the dancing was great, the fact that the couples were 29 years apart caused a lot of discomfort for many. The older star was 58 years old, while the younger actress was only 28. Oh, some people didn't like it, even though the clothes, Paris, and style were beautiful. Pictures from the movie were made by photographer Richard Avedon, and the famous Think Pink number covered everything in pink fabric. Even so, people always talked about the age gap. Astaire once again shocked everyone in 1959 when he got his first real acting job. In the movie On the Beach, he played a scientist living in a world that had been destroyed by a nuclear war. As an alternative to dancing, he showed strong feeling by remaining still. His character killed himself in his car in one scene, while a Salvation Army sign said, "There is still time." Hey, brother. That picture took up an entire page in Life magazine. Reviewers were blown away by his performance. He wasn't even dancing when he got a Golden Globe nod. In 1958, a year before that, he made history on TV. The 17th, NBC showed a full-color evening with Fred Astaire. Even though it looked perfect, the crew had hid cue cards in the set because he was forgetting the words. He was 59 years old at the time. It didn't matter any of that. In 1959, the show got 9 Emmys, more than any other show. He was never really happy, though. To make sure it was perfect, he had the team do a short tap part 52 times in a row. Then 1960 came along, and things changed. There was a blackout that stopped the show for 8 seconds during another live special. People saw a man face rubbed his hips when the lights came back on. Because he had very bad gout, he had taken painkillers right before going on stage. He even got a shot of cortisone that afternoon. The newspapers started to wonder if he was dancing on thin air. Following that, NBC started to record his dances ahead of time to avoid more problems. He played a sensitive character in the 1968 movie Finian's Rainbow, which caused a lot of controversy. Astaire didn't like it when director Francis Ford Coppola added scenes of black sharecroppers taking down signs that said, "Whites only." Despite his dislike of the change, he left the set and didn't come back for hours. Coppola wouldn't give in, and she even fired the dancer who supported Astaire. In October 1968, the movie came out and made $11.6 million. Fans of dance were upset that Coppola mostly just filmed Astaire from the waist up. Sadly, that was his last full show. In 1975, he played a mystery doctor on Battlestar Galactica. He fell and hurt himself badly in one scene, but he kept shooting anyway. He had broken bones in his foot in 1936 that had never healed, doctors later found. As word spread, people began to wonder how much pain he had been in over the years. His last big movie, Ghost Story, released in 1981, showed a very different side of him. In the previous few months, his wife Phyllis had passed away from lung cancer. He wrote in his notebook on December 2nd that everything felt like a funeral. It was even his request that the set stay cold, to make it look like his hands were really shaking. For a scene where he falls into an ice pond, he wouldn't let a double be used. After its release in December, the movie made $23 million. People said nice things about how deeply he felt, but they didn't know he was really sad. Fans finally understood the pain behind the show when those diary pages came out in 2000. Everyone thought Fred Astaire and Phyllis Potter's wedding on July 12, 1933, was the perfect love story. Everything wasn't so easy, though, behind the scenes. In 1938, Gossip magazine said that Fred's never-ending practices were stopping them from having children. After that, Phyllis had a terrible miscarriage in 1941. The reports really took off at that point. A tabloid even said they were going to adopt a child in secret so no one would question Fred's image as a strong main man. Frederick spoke up, which was something he didn't do very often. Anyone who heard him would remember that their son Fred Jr. was born in 1936 and their daughter Ava in 1942. He said that the reports were mean lies. People in charge at MGM Studios made sure that reporters quickly dropped the story. No one could mess up the clean look of their biggest dancing star. Secrets of the truth were hidden, but the need to always look good never went away. Phyllis's death from lung cancer in 1954 shattered Fred's world. At age 55, he quickly turned to scotch to dull the pain after decades of abstaining. There was a traffic stop on Wilshire Boulevard on May 18, 1955, around 2 a.m. He turned around. They checked his breath and found that he was too high. For many years, arrest records were kept secret. The file wasn't found until 1994 by a researcher. Frederick was charged with driving while drunk. Back in 1955, though, no one understood it. No one saw MGM pay the fine and successfully convinced the judge to close the case. Instead, happy articles in fan magazines showed Fred laughing with Gene Kelly on set. He did go to rehab for 5 weeks, though, behind the scenes. He got clean, finished making Daddy Long Legs, and even won an award for being a great movie fan that year. But there were already cracks in it. That's when something unexpected happened. As of June 24, 1980, Fred, who is now 81 years old, married Robin Smith, who was 35 years old. She was a well-known horse who had been on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine. Astonished people. News stories asked her if she loved him or just wanted his money. The bride's daughter, Ava, didn't want to go to the wedding. His sister Adele thought the marriage was silly. An entire TV show almost talked about it as a wedding of convenience, but pulled out of it last minute. At an interview, Fred tried to explain himself by saying, "I'm marrying a friend, not a nurse or a gold digger." Their relationship lasted until he died in 1987. Additionally, Robin never asked for anything more than the simple $5 million trust he gave her. That made everyone who didn't believe her shut up. When Fred Jr. was born in 1936, he had his own pain. Fred was on tour all the time in the 1950s, and his son wrote him angry notes that he never sent. They had him pleading with his dad to come home. Like, "The only steps I know are the ones you're never here to climb with me." Fred found those letters in an old storage unit in 1983. At that point, his health was getting worse. According to Fred Jr., who is now a cow rancher, they made up before his dad died. In 2019, an auction sold the letters for $42,000. Someone told a story about Fred's father who was never there because the dancer had to always be perfect. No one had really seen this side of Fred before. Frederick did more than dance, though. Besides that, he was quietly kind. Between 1946 and 1958, he gave more than $650,000 to dance schools in London and Harlem. The money didn't need to have his name on it. He told them that dance, not fame, should be their main goal. Unfortunately, his kindness caused trouble. When the IRS checked him out in 1959, they found gifts he hadn't reported and strange tax breaks. Reports said he owed $200,000 in back taxes. He almost had to sell Triplicate, his prize-winning horse, to pay for it. He paid the bill in 1961 and kept things from getting worse. Some information about him wasn't made public until 1988, after he had died. Fred had been trying to help without drawing attention to himself while hiding from the taxman, as that letter showed. Furthermore, he fought a long and quiet war with Gene Kelly. Fred was very angry in 1952 when Kelly got the lead part in Singin' in the Rain that Fred really wanted. Based on a letter that got out, Fred thought Kelly's style was rude and too athletic, like weightlifters dancing. Fred tore up lobby banners that had Kelly's picture on them. The dance scene with both guys was canceled by MGM to avoid trouble. In the Ziegfeld Follies in 1945, they sang a duet, but Fred had it taken out of later versions that were sold to TV. Later, private letters from Fred showed up that said Kelly's tapping was like vaudeville fighting. It was always there. The anger never went away. With Ginger Rogers, things got even more difficult. 2:10 o'clock in the morning on April 3, 1935, someone saw Fred and Ginger leaving a hotel room together. That same morning, they were supposed to be on Top Hat's set. There was a strict rule in the office. No relationship between co-stars in real life. A private spy had pictures and said they would share them. It cost $25,000 for the studio to get rid of it. A famous news writer named Luella Parsons started to hint at a scandal that would make people drool, but then she dropped the story. She said they were just friends as she got older. They did find an old note in their files that said one more night, like April 3rd, could spoil the whole movie. Fred also did terrible things. In 1941, he wouldn't appear on the same stage as the black tap group Tip, Tap, and Toe while on tour in Miami. People thought it was wrong, even though he said it was because of local rules. He later admitted it was stupid and said he felt bad about it. Aside from his Broadway show, civil rights groups were protesting outside of it by 1963. Fred tried to make things right by giving money to a civil rights group and hosting a TV show about black dancers. He said that the Miami choice was his darkest moment in an interview in 1970. He said that they should have crushed segregation instead of dancing around it. Additionally, Fred's love for horses led to issues. Not surprisingly, his horse Hi-Hat lost badly in the Santa Anita Derby in 1944. Fred trusted a gambler named Nick the Greek and put more money into the races. There were movement bans during the war, though, so the horses were stuck. By 1946, he had no more money. Thereafter, in 1947, the IRS discovered $400,000 in a fake business in the Cayman Islands. They thought about charges of tax fraud. Fred quietly took care of the matter. His Rolls-Royce was sold for $15,000 to pay the bills, and he laughed, "Take the car. It moves more gracefully than my nags." The charming Fred was always feeling nervous. In 1932, when his sister Adele retired, he began to have panic attacks. Doctors told him he had neurasthenia, a disease of the nerves. He even passed out during a practice in 1927. Barbiturates and early sleep treatments were used on him, according to secret medical records that were released in 2019. In 1936, while making Swing Time, he had MGM make him a quiet room to unwind. He played Hawaiian music over and over to calm down. After some time, Fred's wife Robin told him that he kept a small bottle of medicine in every tuxedo. In 1976, he was asked if he still got scared before shows. He smiled and said, "The feet are steel. Things above the knees are made of custard." A picture was taken of Fred slouched in a chair in July 1950 while the royal wedding was being practiced. He was wearing a sweaty collar and his eyes seemed empty. Notification paper stuck behind him showed that the famous scene where he danced on the roof was about to be filmed. Years later, more advanced scanning showed that the back of that picture had pencil notes hidden in it. "It had been 2 sleepless nights," Fred wrote. "Jane is still wonderful. My timing is off by 1 beat. Donna needs a 3rd attempt. Freddie, be happy and smile." Not able to. He had even made a drawing of the room that was spinning and named it a hamster wheel. It showed how tired he really was, even though he looked great on TV. Someone posted that picture again on Reddit in September 2025. It went around the world in less than 24 hours. Some people said he looked normal, weak, and worn out. The pose was copied by choreographers on TikTok. The picture even made MGM say that they would be restoring Royal Wedding and showing it in 2026. Outsiders saw a new side of Fred Astaire. Not as perfect, but more true.